What's up, y'all? Y'all already know what time it is.
Right.
It's time for another episode of Breakfast with Mark and Jen, where we help your Christian marriage thrive.
Yeah, we're in the building.
We're in the building. We're ready to go.
Let's go.
I always like to say we're locked and loaded. All of the above. And today we are talking about relationship red flags.
You want to go there today?
We have to.
Listen.
Because there's some married folk that you're married and you're still getting red flags.
Right. And that's the thing, is that relationship red flags isn't really about what happened before you got married. You need to be concerned about the red flags that are going on right now.
Yeah.
After you're married.
Exactly. And that's like you said, it's not just about for people who are dating.
Yeah. What are some of the red flags that you're noticing right now in your marriage? Because you don't just turn off your discernment, your intuition when you get married, and all of a sudden, because you put a ring on it, you tie the knot.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to really think about certain things that are going on, be cautious about certain things that are going on. And there are indicators that tell you whether or not your marriage is healthy.
Yes. Yes. And I think
those are red flags.
The first one that comes to mind, Mark, comes to mind just over our years of talking with and different couples, talking them through things. But if your spouse is usually communicative and all of a sudden you notice they don't want to talk about anything with you. They don't want to talk about what's bothering them. They don't want to talk about family vacation, nothing. They don't want to talk about anything.
They don't want to talk about what they're interested in.
Yeah, that's a red flag. Now, if you started your relationship non-communicative, that's a different issue.
Right.
But if you have noticed a shift in the level of communication with your spouse, and now it's going on and on and on. It wasn't just like a day. I'm not talking about your spouse had a bad day and they didn't feel like talking.
Right.
I'm saying for days, weeks, months, you and your spouse they don't want to communicate with you. That's a red flag.
It's a red flag because something has changed. Something has changed, and all of a sudden they've gone quiet. And you have to understand that it's not that they've gone quiet overall. They've just gone quiet with you. So the question is, who are they talking to? Because whoever they're talking to and pouring out their heart to, that is a potential problem for your marriage. It's a problem whether it's just a friend and it's platonic and it's not even a friend of the opposite sex.
Right.
It's an issue if it's their mama. It's an issue if it's their uncle. It doesn't even have to go to that kind of level.
Right.
But if all of a sudden they're talking to their mama on a level that they never used to, and they are divulging information, secrets, just pouring out their heart, and they used to do it to you.
Yes.
Now they're doing it to their mama. Well, that's a red flag. And it's an indicator that something has actually happened to the communication in your marriage to the extent that now they don't feel like you're the safe place that you used to be.
Correct.
You're no longer that warm shoulder that they could cry on.
Yep.
And when that changes, then you could be going down a slippery slope. So that's definitely a red flag as it relates to communication.
It's a huge red flag, Mark, because I've seen instances where a lot of the couples that we've talked to over the years, when this happens, and I'm not trying to be funny or stereotypical, but a lot of times it happens on the guy's end. And I think it's because guys are already, the average guy is already not overly talkative. You have your exceptions. But I think generally speaking, most guys can agree that the average guy is not overly talkative, even if the girl he's with, he's actually really into and really loves her and even feels like she's safe. It still takes y'all a minute to open all the way up. So if you do something to make him feel as if you're not safe, it can cause him to shut down. And it can happen to women too. And I would say, Mark, whether you're a male or a female, what can cause you to no longer feel like a safe space from your spouse's perspective is if they open up to you, and every time they open up to you, all they get is being degraded. All they get is comparison.
Right.
So if you're a spouse and you say to your spouse, you know what, I need to open up fully and let you know I'm still struggling with this. I'm still struggling with my finances. I'm still struggling with that bad habit I told you about.
Right.
And all they get in response is, man, you're good for, what are you good for?
Yeah.
All they get is, how are you still struggling with that? You're
struggling
weak.
with that? Right. How long has it been? It's been years.
Yeah.
And you're still struggling with that. I thought we talked about it. I thought we went to the programs.
Yes.
I thought we were doing, and you're still struggling with that? Well, that's going to push the person away.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause the person to definitely close up. And, men, we close up pretty easily because it's difficult for us to expose our hearts, our inner feelings, and things like our heart and our inner feelings. Why? Because we always have to be strong. And we want to be strong physically and emotionally. And we're taught, hey, if you're going to be emotional and bear all your emotions and cry and be sensitive on, then you're not a strong man.
Yeah.
And I think that brings up some issues. So that's a red flag. I think, where you once were communicating.
Yes.
And opening up, and now you're not, that's a red flag. Here's another red flag, all right?
Uh-oh. Remember, guys, these aren't scripted, so I don't know what he's coming with.
Well, it's not that bad.
Oh.
It could be bad. But if you notice that money is leaving the account and you don't know where it's going, you don't know why it's leaving, and these charges don't make sense to you.
Better be saving up for a dope birthday gift that you don't want me to know about.
That's a red flag.
That is a red flag.
It's a red
That's
flag.
a good one.
It's a red flag because there's something going on there.
Yeah.
Money is so important to a marriage and how you handle your finances. If something's happening with that and it can't be explained, then that's a red flag.
I agree, Mark.
That's a red flag.
For the record, money leaving the house unaccounted for doesn't even have to be an affair.
No, that's what I was thinking, but no.
Then I know that's what everybody's thinking.
That's what I was thinking.
That's the first thing that anyone's going to think, right? So that's normal. But maybe your spouse has picked up a gambling problem.
Right.
Maybe your spouse is blowing it on alcohol.
Yeah.
Maybe your spouse is just developed some other bad habit that you can't even think of.
Yeah.
And they're trying to keep it from you. But that was a good one.
That's a big
money
red flag.
leaving the account, and you can't account for why it's leaving the account.
And that's why, however you handle your money and manage your money as a couple, you can do it many different ways, but you better have a handle on it and know what's going on. If your spouse has a separate bank account, it's separate, meaning they manage it, but you need access to it. I mean,
Right.
Don't be out here like you can do whatever you want and there's no accountability. No, there's accountability to it because it's our money, even though it may be in your account. And that's the thing, is that you need to check up on your spouse.
Yeah, for sure.
And when I say check in on your spouse, you don't do it from a parental standpoint. You do it from an accountability standpoint.
Yeah.
That we hold each other accountable.
Right.
If here's a good one that I'm kind of going into. I just thought about this. If your spouse picks up your phone and says, "Oh, let me just check this picture real quick," and the other person's like, "Hey, no, don't check my phone. I'll open it." Or if you don't have the passcode to your spouse's phone, that's a red flag.
I agree, because we have the password to each other's phones. We share our accounts, but like, you can get into my phone, no problem.
Yeah.
If you wanted to check my email, you could scroll through.
If you don't have access to my social media, that's a red flag.
Yes, because if your spouse is coming to you and saying, I'm a grown woman, why do you need access to I'm a grown man, why do you need access to well, how grown are you? Because why can't I have access? Maybe you're too grown. It's a red
flag. You're too grown. It's a red flag. If you are in a relationship, if you're married to someone and they don't give you access to their phone, to their email, to their social media, and you can't roll up in there anytime you want, that's a red flag.
Of course, absolutely.
That's a red flag. There's so many things happening in those different areas, if in those different arenas, where someone can get into trouble, not even because they want to, but because they don't have the accountability that at any time my wife can pick up my phone just because, she needs to check something, or she needs to look something up. But she's not even checking in on my stuff, but just the fact that you have the freedom to do that shows that, hey, I'm not hiding anything and I'm fully accountable to you.
Exactly. It's a huge red flag. And I would say another red flag in marriage, Mark, is if you find that when you and your spouse have made a decision, this is for the married folk that have kids, have made a decision about something that you're either going to do with the kids or prohibit the kids from doing, and in front of the kids, you're saying, actually, you know what? I don't think we should do that anymore. I think actually you're wrong. I think we shouldn't actually make them go to bed at 8:30. I'm going to say 8 o'clock. And you haven't talked about it with your spouse yet. That's a red flag. Why? Because you are training your children inadvertently that what the other parent says is not necessarily what goes. Our kids know if you ask us a question and the parent you're asking says no, they already know. And it's funny, we've never had to say it to them, but because of how we operate, they know. That doesn't mean now go to dad and ask or go to mom and ask. When we say, no, you can't get your iPad right now, they don't go to the other parent and ask for the iPad because they know, listen, if one of them said no, that's both of them. They know that.
That's it.
So that's a red flag if you're finding that your spouse is consistently, we all make mistakes, but I'm saying if they have a habit of doing this in front of your kid, you got to figure out what's the root there. Are they trying to somehow make you the bad cop?
What's the root there? Is the root that they have insecurity issues?
Right.
And so deep down inside, they want to feel like they can make decisions too? Is the root issue that you're not on the same page as it relates to your communication? So you haven't talked about it enough outside of the kids to make good decisions in front of the kids? What's the root issue? What's the root issue? And so I'm thinking that, a lot of times there are things that go on beneath the surface that come out at the wrong times. And so if you're in front of your kids and you're trying to make a decision and one spouse is like, hey, I think we should go in a different direction.
Yeah.
The question is, why are you thinking that? Like, why are we doing this now?
Yeah.
What else are you trying to say? And sometimes that happens through miscommunication. But if you see a pattern, then what is that person struggling with that they're not really saying?
Yeah, because we try to make a habit of, if our kids ask both of us, hey, can I watch this movie, for example? Because we're very big on making sure that the movies they watch, they don't all have to be about like Saul on the road to Damascus. But what? They don't all have to be about Saul on the road to Damascus.
I don't know why Saul, though, on the road to Damascus.
Just because I was reading the book of Acts last night.
But you could have talked about like Veggie Tales.
But they're too old our kids are too old for that. So that doesn't apply. So it doesn't always have to be a show about Saul on the road to Damascus. However,
I don't even know if there's such a show.
Of course.
I don't know if there's such a show, Saw
No,
on
an
the Road.
episode, but the whole show, like, I guess what I was saying is all their shows
No,
don't
but
have
I'm
to
being-
be stories from the Bible.
But I'm being funny.
Oh,
I'm being funny.
okay.
What episode is that?
On that show they like from Right Now Media. I can't even remember the name of it right now.
Oh, see, that's why, you're the good parent that does all the Bible stuff with them. 'Cause I'm like,
There's
what
a
episode
show-
is that?
There's a show on Right Now Media that they like to watch, and each time it's based on an actual story in the Bible, even though they try to apply it to like today's. Whew. Anyway, Right Now Media, if you're seeing this, I'm a great writer. So we're getting way off track.
No, but that's why you teach our kids the Bible. And I don't. Because I ain't got no time for Saul on the Road to Damascus. Not that Saul on the Road to Damascus isn't important, but I ain't got time for that episode. So I'm like, oh, Saul on the Road to Damascus can be a dope, episode for kids. I didn't know that.
Okay.
Because when I think Saul on the Road to Damascus, there's nothing like dope, kiddie, fun about that.
Okay. Well,
So that's why I just took time to go there.
okay, and we appreciate that. So where I was getting at, though, is a lot of times our kids will come to us and ask to watch a particular movie or a show, and we're very big on being as vigilant as we can to not have our children watch things that counteract what we are trying to teach them, which is that the Bible is the truth. Jesus is the truth. And if he says something is wrong, it is wrong. That's what we're teaching them. That being said, they'll come to us and say, can we watch this movie? And the way we do it is if one person is like, oh, it doesn't look that bad. And the other person's like, no, I don't think so. I find that what we tend to say is, you know what? Actually, guys, we're both going to take a look at it. We're going to decide and we'll get back to you. But we're human. I'm not saying we're perfect, but in those kind of decisions, we don't have a habit of, well, listen, mom says you can't watch it, but I'm fine, guys. Go upstairs and watch it. My husband is very good at saying, and he's right, when it comes to those things specifically for the kids, I tend to know a little bit more up front sometimes. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it'll be something I've heard about from other moms that believe the way we believe, and I'll be like, no, I don't think I heard good things about that. And so where he may say, oh, it sounds okay, and I'll be like, guys, I don't think, he'll then pull back and say, well, you know what, guys? Because mom's not sure,
right.
We both have to be sure, so the two of us will talk about it, and then we'll let you know. Mm-hmm. So that's how, with your children, you can counteract those types of things. Mm-hmm. If you're on different pages, just literally say to your kids, you know what? We're going to think about it. We'll let you guys know.
Right.
Instead of saying, listen, mom said no, I'm saying yes. That's like the worst thing you can teach your kid is that, oh, mom's the one not to go to, but dad?
Yeah.
Or,
You really don't want to teach your kids that.
No.
Because, kids pick up on all these little things.
Exactly. But how do, Mark, we tell people, we brought up a couple of red flags, and I'm sure there's more that we haven't even thought of. So what can we leave people with? How do people tackle red flags in their marriage, even if it's a red flag we didn't mention? Like, what are some general practical advice we can give them for how to tackle red flags now that you said I do, walk down the aisle,
Right.
made a covenant?
If you notice a red flag in your marriage, confront it. Mm-hmm. You never allow a red flag to go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And to continue to, wave throughout the marriage and continue to appear in the marriage, and you act like the red flag isn't there.
Yeah.
You see it. You see the signs, and you're actually making a conscious decision to move past the sign and not address it. You have to, number one, confront the red flag. Depending on what the red flag is, there's ways to confront it. Mm. There's ways to go about it. Mm-hmm. So if you realize that your husband changed the password to his phone, and you go to pick it up and the password ain't working, what do? Do you start flipping out and say, oh my God, I can't believe.
Some women are like, I'm just about to knock all this stuff over.
Listen, you're going through the drawers. You're calling friends. You're now Inspector Gadget. You're going through, you're inspecting everything. You hired, a PI, a private investigator, and you're following your husband just because he changed the password on his phone. Why don't you just be like, hey, I noticed you changed the password on your phone. Why?
So we're saying confront it with wisdom. The Bible even
Could be a legit reason.
The Bible even says to be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove. So in other words, you don't just go start reacting on a 10.
Right.
The minute that something happens that you don't understand, you have to ask for clarity.
Yeah. And the thing is that we sometimes our confrontation is actually an explosion of other things
That's true.
that we haven't really dealt with, and we're confronting one issue, but it's a whole bunch of issues put together, and then we flip out on our spouse.
Right.
And it was never that big a deal in the first place. So if you notice something, just start by asking simple questions in a calm manner, in a way that you can communicate before you start drawing conclusions. One of the issues is that when people confront red flags or issues that they have in their marriage, they're bringing all their assumptions into the confrontation instead of going into the confrontation with an open mind.
And that's difficult because we're human.
It's very difficult.
But I think, Mark, what a good tactic is to confront it as soon as you're aware of it.
Yeah.
Because the longer you wait trying to either sweep it under the rug or pretending like it doesn't bother you, you have more time to formulate assumptions.
Correct.
And develop a perspective that may be completely off kilter.
Correct.
So the minute you notice the password doesn't work, the minute you notice, wait a minute, this is like the third time they've contradicted me in front of the kids.
Yeah.
This is like the umpteenth time. The minute that you're like, wait a minute, this isn't a mistake, this is a pattern.
Yeah.
Say something then.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting until they've done it for months. And now you're extremely angry. Your assumptions are completely wrong. Now that's when you end up going around the house knocking stuff over.
That's when you're in a big problem. And the question is, if you confront red flags early enough, then the trust in your marriage should still be there. And it should be strong enough that a red flag doesn't send you over the edge.
Yeah.
If you're going over the edge, well, that means you have ignored red flags along the way. Yeah. And now you're going over the edge because he changed his passcode, right? And now you can't get into his phone, but it's because you saw other things along the way that you never addressed, and now you're flipping out. Exactly. You saw how he was hanging out with that coworker, right? And now you flipping out. Because that combined with the fact that you can't get into his phone, all of a sudden now,
oh Lord,
it's next level. Well, you should have confronted the fact that you saw him having conversations with his coworker, and it made you feel away. It made you feel away. And the thing is that red flags, when they go ignored, they slowly but surely erode the trust in your marriage.
Yeah.
You can erode trust by doing nothing.
That's good. That's good.
Right?
Because trust has to be built. And so the only way to build something is to get your hands on it and keep working that thing.
Yeah, if you ignore it, then it's not being built. It can only be demolished. And
out here building your house on the sand.
Listen.
And then when the rains come and the storms come.
Well, let's talk about that.
That song that if you grew up in church, they used to sing, the foolish man built his house upon the sand. No,
I'm laughing only because, it was Saul on the road to Damascus, and now it's the song about the foolish man built his house on the sand.
And some people are like, what house is that? And I say to you, you have to read your word.
But let's talk about that real quick. You don't know that
there was a man who built his house on the sand.
Jesus has that parable, right?
Yes.
He has that short story. And the commonality between the wise man that built his house on a rock and the foolish man that built his house on the sand, both of them experienced storms.
Exactly.
You can build your marriage right, and it doesn't exempt you from the storm.
Correct.
So
or
if
you can
a marriage
build it with sandbags from the home improvement store, and it's just going to get tore down. Out here building your marriage with sandbags because you just...
Yeah, I mean, you could do that too. But the thing is that it has to be built right.
Exactly.
It has to be built right. And people will exchange concrete rock for sand.
You know why? Because the sand
Why?
is easier and quicker.
Let's go. Let's go.
People don't want to do
Right.
oftentimes the hard work. It is hard to handle rocks. Rocks
Yes.
are hard on your hands.
Yes.
They're hard on your back.
Let's go.
They break a sweat when you got to pick up heavy rocks. So a lot of people will I'm just going to build my house with sand. I'm going to just build it with like sweeping things under the rug.
Yup.
I'm going to build it with acting like everything's okay because that's easier. But in the long run, that's the house that gets torn down the quickest.
I'm telling you, you can sweep sand under the rug.
Exactly.
You can't sweep rocks under the rug and not notice that there's some rocks up under there. And the thing is that people, when they ignore red flags, they're dealing with sand. And they're like, this sand is going to actually work and keep us solid. When the storm comes, the whole thing crumbles because you had these red flags and you didn't build your house right. And you expected the sand
To withstand a storm.
to withstand the storm.
And I like what you said. Every marriage is going to have a storm. So that's the variable that you cannot eradicate regardless of who you are.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do to make sure your Christian marriage thrives
Yeah.
and doesn't fail is to do the heavy lifting and the hard work. And some people act like I'm saved. That's all I need to make my marriage work. If only it were that simple.
Yeah, people just don't want to do the hard work of confronting red flags. And you say, hey, my spouse would never do that to me. Or, hey, they're good.
Or
maybe they're not good.
Or I'm not going to do the hard work because that's all them. There's nothing I had to do with why the red flag even came in the first place.
Ooh.
And I'm not giving people an excuse for poor, immoral behavior. What I am
Right.
saying, though, is that you also have to be honest, and depending on the behavior, did you somehow drive them to think that was their only option?
How did you contribute to this red flag?
The only red flag I will never ask you to ask yourself about is if your partner is physically abusing you. Male or female, I will say, to me, there's nothing you can do to justify beating on your spouse.
Right.
But if you're like, oh, you changed the password, that ain't got nothing to do with me. Really?
Right. How about you in my phone every single day, nosy,
And just making
and
me feel...
making me feel like, hey, you don't trust me.
Yeah.
So the only way I shut that down is to change the password because...
And now
you
you're
know
like,
what?
I knew it. I knew you were hiding something. Even though you didn't find anything when you had the password.
I'm telling you.
So
Listen, there's so many layers to red flags.
Yeah.
Because no marriage is exempt from red
Oh, yeah.
flags. But how do you deal with red flags?
So you're saying confront it, and I would say also don't be adverse to getting a faith-based counselor in the mix as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the red flag is severe enough that maybe you don't know how to confront it, and you do need an unbiased mediator to guide you through the steps of doing the work to confront the red flag and also, bringing it down.
You got to be careful, though, because, when you bring a third party in, if you're just out the blue, like, oh, I scheduled us for a counseling session. And you never said, like, you didn't preempt this. Like,
Yes, you need to communicate that.
yeah, and I'm not even saying you're saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just bringing to the table that could be a passive-aggressive response to a red flag. Like, I don't want to do the work. I'm just going to get a counselor in here. And then your spouse is like, when did we get to the level where we had an issue? And then just because you didn't want to confront it. I think that when you've done some previous work and what you're saying is, hey, get a third party in there because you may be dealing with such a red flag that it's bigger than you. And you want to communicate effectively.
Right.
So that you guys can heal and continue to build. So a third party is a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm just in this mode today where I'm like, I just sense so many marriages out there where sometimes people take what we say, but they actually don't strategize about it and do it the proper way.
Oh no, they're like, oh my goodness.
Oh,
you
Jen
guys
said
are...
go get a counselor, so that's what I'm doing. And like, nah, talk about it first.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, listen, we could keep going.
We could keep going.
We could go. That was only like 2 or 3 red flags.
Yeah.
And there's so many others, but we wanted to hit red flags from the angle of you're married already. Mm-hmm. What are some red flags that you're experiencing in your marriage?
Yeah.
And I think that's helpful because, you know, people often talk about red flags to watch out for before you choose a spouse.
Exactly.
But nobody talks about,
The
I
red
got
flags.
this person and they still giving me red flags.
Wow. Yeah. And also, not every red flag is a grounds for divorce.
Say that again.
Not every red flag is a grounds for divorce. Some of you see a red flag pop up in your marriage, and so then you pull out your white flag, and you're like, that's it, I surrender to divorce court. And it's like, what?
Wow.
Because there's so many things that are actually able to be fixed, but it goes back to you saying nobody wants to do the tough work.
That's so good. I love that.
People
Not
act like
every red flag is grounds for divorce.
No.
That's good. I love that.
No. If every red flag was grounds for divorce, Christ should have divorced all of us a long time ago. Because we give him red flags all the time with the stuff we pull. And yet he's like, and I still love you, and I'm still going to work this out with you because that's how much you mean to me. I made a covenant with you when I saved you.
Right.
When I bought you, when I shed my blood for you, I made a covenant. So you're mine, and we're going to just have to ride this thing till the wheels fall off.
That's actually what we're going to get into next time, because that's the difference between Christ's idea of marriage and sometimes our idea of marriage.
Yes.
He sees marriage as a covenant, not a contract.
Yes.
When marriage is a contract to you,
feel
then
like
you can rip that thing
you
up.
can terminate it, yeah.
And you can terminate that. But when it's a covenant, it's so much deeper.
Yes.
And you have to ride this thing out.
Yep. Just
And
out
that's what
here
we
breaking covenants. There's no grounds for breaking it.
When you say that, it just hits home because breaking a covenant is very difficult.
And in God's eyes, it's very serious.
And God has never broken a covenant.
No.
Because even his covenant with Israel is not broken. It's just estranged for a time period.
Yeah.
And then he's coming back to fulfill the covenant.
Yep.
Because he's like,
day,
I made a promise.
Yeah.
And even though we're going through hardship, I'm coming back to rectify and solidify this promise I made to you.
So at the end of the day, he's not just going to let the covenant get blown to smithereens.
No. All right, y'all. Listen, we got to end it there. Okay. This has been another episode of Breakfast with Mark and Jen. And listen, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Let's get the word out. And we would love for you to help us do that. Until next time, we want you to take care of your marriage, and we'll see you again.